In April 2025, the Baisaran Valley in Kashmir was in the middle of peak tourism season. This meadow is an active economic hub, providing the primary livelihood for the surrounding region. On April 22nd, that peace ended when militants from the resistance front emerged from these forests to launch a targeted attack on civilians. The assailants methodically separated the crowd, checking government IDs and forcing individuals to recite Islamic verses. Anyone who failed the test was shot at point-blank range. In total, 26 tourists were killed, including a Navy officer on his honeymoon and a tech worker visiting from the United States. The killers chose this location to inflict maximum damage on the local economy. By targeting high-profile tourists, they aimed to paralyze the region and force the cancellation of the upcoming Amarnath Yatra pilgrimage. This was a calculated provocation. The attackers wanted to fracture India's internal unity and bait the government into a predictable, reactive military strike across the border. The Indian government faced a core dilemma. Punishing a state-sponsored proxy usually requires military force, but applying that force against a neighbor like Pakistan risks a full-scale nuclear exchange. Pakistan's military strategy relied on this specific fear. For decades, they assumed India's concerns about nuclear escalation would limit any retaliation to manageable skirmishes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's administration prepared a response that shifted the focus from limited military retaliation to systemic national pressure. India deployed a multi-domain strategy that targeted the militants in the field and the state infrastructure supporting them at the same time. The first phase of the counterattack was entirely non-kinetic. Before a single bullet was fired, India weaponized its diplomatic and economic leverage to isolate its neighbor. This map shows the Indus River system. India suspended the 1960 Indus Waters Treaty, declaring blood and water cannot flow together. Pakistan relies on these rivers for 80% of its agriculture. The halt dropped Pakistani dams to 10% capacity, threatening severe food shortages. To enforce this, India utilized major physical choke points, including the Bagli Har Dam on the Chenab River, trapping the water before it could cross the border. Simultaneously, the government initiated an economic lockdown. They closed the Wagah border, suspended all bilateral trade, and canceled the visas of all Pakistani nationals residing in the country. By weaponizing water and trade, India demonstrated that economic and diplomatic isolation could inflict as much strategic damage as a traditional military campaign. The kinetic phase launched on May 7th. Codenamed Operation Sindoor, India executed a 23-minute aerial blitz using Rafale jets and Scalp missiles. The jets bypassed air defense systems to obliterate 9 terror launch pads. The strike eliminated over 100 militants, including high-value masterminds linked to previous major attacks on Indian soil. Pakistan retaliated with heavy artillery shelling in the Poonch district. The bombardment targeted civilian areas, destroying hundreds of homes and 31 local schools. The escalation peaked on May 10th with Operation Banyan al-Marsus, which triggered the world's first drone-to-drone combat between two nuclear-armed neighbors. This high-tech theater of war turned a decades-old border conflict into a 21st century technological battleground. A ceasefire was reached on May 10th. While the United States claimed to have mediated the deal, Indian officials maintained that the agreement was reached directly between the two countries. In the aftermath, India secured a global narrative victory. They successfully framed their actions as a mandate for counterterrorism, decoupling the strikes from the localized dispute over Kashmir. By striking both terror camps and sovereign military bases, India erased the diplomatic distinction between a rogue proxy and the government that provides its shelter. In this new environment, a cross-border terror attack triggers a synchronized response against a nation's economy, its water supply, and its military infrastructure simultaneously.